a people's budget, and I would like to thank and compliment them for that. I would also like to thank the staff of the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs who worked patiently and tirelessly with the ministers to ensure that the indigenous and hinterland people across the 10 regions of this country were equitably represented in this budget. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2019's theme is quite up. I am very proud to say that the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs has been transforming the economy, empowering people, and building sustainable communities for the good life in Guyana's heartland since 2015, when the APNU-AFC government came into office. Mr. Speaker, poverty limits one's right and freedom to realize one's full potential to almost non-existent, and our indigenous people have been living in poverty for too long. Mr. Speaker, according to Amartya Sen, the UN Nobel laureate, poverty is not just a lack of money, it is not having the capability to realize one's full potential as a human being. Mr. Speaker, for the past 3 years since this government took office, the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs has been focusing on building the capacity of our indigenous and hinterland people. Your government, Mr. Speaker, does not believe in handouts. We believe in empowering people and giving them the economic support required that they can create successful and meaningful lives for themselves. To this end, Mr. Speaker, the Hinterland Employment and Youth Service has provided 1 year of training to 3,795 youths in 222 villages over the last 2 years. This training allows for capacity building, strengthening of life skills, bolstering literacy and numeracy skills, creating self-awareness and building esteem, strengthening individual vocational interests and entrepreneurial aptitude, with agriculture and ecotourism being mandatory. Mr. Speaker, so far, 2,054 small businesses, some individually and some in groups, were established by these youths in villages as far as Kokshibai, Tipiru, and Achweb in Region 9, and Monkey Mountain and Red Creek in Region 8, and also in Region 7. Businesses range from cattle rearing, poultry rearing, broilers, layers, and ducks, crop and vegetable farming, nursery, grafting of fruit trees, fishing, fish farming, sheep, goat, and pig rearing, cassava bread, quinches, cashew production, honey production, hardware stores, floating grocery store, and the list goes on and on. You name it, and the Hays are doing it. Mr. Speaker, to date, government has invested $2.3 billion for the development of hinterland youth. And in the 2019 budget, in order to ensure that these businesses grow in strength and flourish, a further $171.1 million is allocated for monitoring and mentoring, along with additional monetary support. Mr. Speaker, other than producing young entrepreneurs, Hays is really a stepping stone for many of the youth. The training they receive has allowed them to acquire the confidence in themselves to reach for their stars. Hence, some have moved on to attend GTI, GSA, the Guyana Defense Force, and the teaching profession. Recently, we have received a request to provide 12 Hays youth from regions 1, 7, 8, and 9 to be trained as peer educators and dot supporters to provide care and support under the National TB program. Hays Youth in Governance. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say that village elections during the May to June 2018 period saw a number of Hays youth and facilitators being elected to serve on the new village councils. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the principles of the Green State Development Strategy in developing green and sustainable economic sectors, and in line with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs is leading in the projection and implementation of these national and international goals. Sustainable, environmentally friendly, and income-generating projects. The Monkey Mountain Lapidary, for instance. Mr. Speaker, this year $10 million was allocated for the Monkey Mountain Lapidary workshop. I'm happy to say that 7 persons are at this very moment being employed in the construction of this workshop, which will be completed before year end and will be commissioned in the new year. The women are extremely excited about this and have asked to design the front of the building with semi-precious stones that they have gathered. The first training of youth and other villagers from 4 villages has been completed, and tools to mine the semi-precious stones when the need arises have been provided. The second training is being done as we speak in Kurukabaro, where 5 youth each from another 4 villages are gathered for 2 weeks. Mr. Speaker, for 2019, an additional sum of $3 million has been allocated in this budget to support this project to purchase jewel boxes and bags crafted by the indigenous people themselves and the provision of internet connectivity. The marketing of these semi-precious stones, jewelry and ornaments, and other craft will be done via the internet, thus utilizing modern technology to generate income for hundreds of residents in Monkey Mountain and the surrounding villages. Mr. Speaker, this project speaks directly to the theme of Budget 2019 and is a definite solution to the poverty the people of Region 8 have been forced to endure for years because of the conscious neglect by the previous administration. Mr. Speaker, 22+ years was enough to implement innovative and sustainable measures to reduce poverty in this region. But the will was not there, Mr. Speaker, and whatever was done is minuscule when compared to this government and what it is doing in a matter of a little over 3 years. Santa Rosa ground coffee. Mr. Speaker, this year this project received a sum of $10 million. So far, 15 acres of land has been cleared. NARI has tested the soil. The Santa Rosa farmers are building their shade house nursery to accommodate the arrival of over 13,000 in vitro disease-free, sterile stage 1 Robusta coffee plantlets from Nature Source Improved Plants Laboratory in Tapachula, Mexico. These coffee plantlets will be in the nursery for a little over 2 months before they're ready to be planted in the farms. A coffee expert from Jamaica will be on the ground with the farmers to ensure that everything is in order. Mr. Speaker, this is a multi-year project. Hence, an additional $15 million has been budgeted for the construction of the processing facility and furnishing of the said facility next year. This collaborative effort between the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs and the Santa Rosa Village Council has seen the council donating 1 acre of land as the site for this project. With the assistance of the Ministry of Social Protection Co-op Department, the Santa Rosa Coffee Co-op has already been established. Mr. Speaker, this is another transformative and sustainable project that the almost 10,000 residents of Santa Rosa will benefit from in the next 2 years until the next 90 to 100 years. Coffee will become part of their DNA. Mr. Speaker, this government cares for the people. We're not only looking after their present, but the future of their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. Smith's Creek Crab and Fish Processing Facility. Mr. Speaker, when I visited Smith's Creek 2 years ago, it made me sad to see how our indigenous brothers and sisters were living in that community. The lands where they built their houses were not filled properly, so their yards were mostly muddy, and most of their houses had no walls. Many of them cannot read or write either, and it is not as if they're living far into the hinterland where access is difficult. They are just beside the river. Mr. Speaker, the residents of Smith Creek were living in that location for several years now, and the powers that be then could have done much to see that they enjoy a better standard of living, but nothing was done. Mr. Speaker, this government, because we care for the welfare of our people, in 2018 provided $10 million for the establishment of a crab and fish processing facility. As we speak, residents of this community are making the blocks that will be used to build the facility. Approximately 50 workers have been employed to clear 1 acre of land and dig the drainage around that acre of land, build a coca and a dam, and they have already done so and received their payment. They have now proceeded to making concrete blocks. Mr. Speaker, with construction commencing during this month, the facility expected to be commissioned early February next year. Mr. Speaker, this is also a multi-year project, and Budget 2019 has an allocation of a further $6 million for the installation of a solar farm and the marketing aspect of the business. With assistance from Global Seafoods, residents who will be working in the facility will undergo strict training in the processing of fish and crab at the highest hygienic standard. This project will also impact 2 nearby communities, Morawana and Imbatero, and later other riverine communities, transforming their communities, thus raising their standard of living. Mr. Speaker, this is no handout. This is your government investing in the ordinary people, whether they vote for us or not, building their capacity and providing the economic support so that they can have the opportunity to live a good life. Cassava flour processing factory. Mr. Speaker, $10 million was allocated for this project in 2018 to construct a cassava flour processing factory, clearing and preparing of 30 acres of land and the purchasing of the cassava sticks for planting. Mr. Speaker, construction of the facility will commence during this month and should be completed within 2.5 months. This will create employment for many of the villagers who will be providing most of the materials being used, with added persons working on the actual construction. In the 2019 budget, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to see that an additional $16 million will be invested in this project for equipping the factory and operation startup. Training in the processing of the cassava flour will also be conducted for persons who will be working in the factory by the Ministry of Social Protection, Board of Industrial Training Department. And for training in packaging, we will engage the Ministry of Business. Mr. Speaker, this is a fantastic project. Yes. Not only will the factory produce cassava flour for use in the region and further afield, but it will be producing cashew starch and other byproducts of the cassava. This project will generate sustainable income for the 30 farmers and their families and the entire population of 900 of Guyana and hundreds of farmers from neighboring villages. Again, with the assistance of the Ministry of Social Protection Co-op Department, the Guyana Farmers Co-op has already been established. Mr. Speaker, the indigenous people are ready and willing and happy to do what they know best: farming, fishing, art and craft. And they're excited about the value-added element. Mr. Speaker, this is the opportunity they have been waiting on for so long. An opportunity to carve out a good life for themselves with adequate support from their government, a caring government. And that's who we are, Mr. Speaker. Sun-dried tomato. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me not to make mention of the sun-dried tomato processing facility in Paramakatoy. Mr. Speaker, with careful monitoring and nourishing by Dr. Suresh Narayan and his team from IAST, the Paramakatoy sun-dried tomato facility continues to grow into a strong cottage industry, producing quality tomato ketchup and salad dressing. Last year, this project started with 51 farmers. Now it has grown to 135 farmers, many of whom are women. The one solar dryer, a donation from the Canadian High Commission, is now not adequate enough to dry all the tomatoes being produced. Hence, they have invested a further $5 million for another solar dryer this year. Government's investment of $59 million plus the Canadian grant is reaping benefits for the hard-working farmers of Paramakatoy. Mr. Speaker, the 2019 budget supports by way of almost $60 million for more green, innovative, and sustainable income-generating projects in Parima in Region 7, Santa Cruz and Tobago Hill in Region 1, and Morawana and Bina Hill in Region 9. Mr. Speaker, these projects will directly impact the poor and the vulnerable by creating employment and generating income in these communities, thus raising the standard of living and providing the opportunity for indigenous brothers and sisters to live a good life. Yes. Mr. Speaker, the 2019 budget continues to touch the ordinary people's lives in a very special way. The students of Chinapao in Region 8, for instance, walk for 2.5 days to attend secondary school in Paramakatawe. Wow. And this has been going on for years. They sleep the first night in the jungle and continue to walk the next day. Wow. This has been going on for years, as I said. Mr. Speaker, in this day and age, this is unacceptable, even in the hinterland. Hence, the sum of $2 million has been allocated to build a rest shelter for these students and their parents who visit them periodically. Another $2 million has been allocated to build another rest shelter to accommodate the students who walk from Karasporo to Paramakatawe. These shelters will bring comfort, some form of comfort, while government will be looking into building proper roads and bridges so that vehicles will be able to traverse these roads. Education and hinterland development. Mr. Speaker, we cannot underestimate the value of hinterland development through education. Education is still considered one of the most significant steps towards empowering indigenous peoples to participate and mainstream more fully in their communities and our beautiful country. It is certainly an indispensable asset to attain freedom and social justice. The government of Guyana, through the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, in partnership with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Communities, would have delivered a comprehensive support and access program, which includes the President 5Bs, that saw increased attendance and improved performance at the nursery and primary levels in the hinterland. Additionally, the school's uniform program, for which $89.4 million is included in the 2019 estimates, continue to bring relief to more than 33,000 hinterland students in 67 schools at every level of the school system, all leading to the positive impact, resulting with exceptional performances of students who enjoyed quality education through the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs Secondary Scholarship Program, for which $108.4 million is in the 2019 estimates. Mr. Speaker, we do not seek to change what is working. We add to that and improve and implement new things. Over the period 2017 to 2018, more than 186 students were enrolled in the program, while a significant 87% or 89 out of 95 students matriculated with 5 or more subjects, inclusive of English and maths with grades 1 to 3. Through quality administration by this APNU AFC government, the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs is pleased to announce, Mr. Speaker, that because of this program, more than 67 students would have gone on to register as students of the University of Guyana and other tertiary institutions. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, government, recognizing this growing need for support for indigenous and hinterland students pursuing tertiary education, Budget 2018 provided for $186 million to construct a dormitory to accommodate 120 students. This dormitory will be completed and outfitted in the first quarter of 2019. This, Mr. Speaker, is a demonstration of the APNU AFC government's commitment that Guyanese citizenship, inclusive of our indigenous peoples, are guaranteed equal rights and equal opportunities towards elimination of inequality particularly between residents of the coastlands and the hinterland, and to quote His Excellency, this is essential to ensuring first-class citizenship for everyone. Indigenous residents. Mr. Speaker, this government has also recognized the need for an improved quality of service and accommodation for Indigenous people who are required to travel to Georgetown for medical treatment and or other necessary social services. Example, first-time mothers who are referred to the hospital in Georgetown to be monitored by experienced doctors, and tushaus who need to transact business on behalf of the village. Mr. Speaker, at least 3 rooms will be provided for them in the extension. This facility was designed to, the previous facility was designed to accommodate 120 persons, and at times there are as much as 193 persons needing accommodation. Hence the reason for the construction of the new extension at a cost of $27 million provided for in the 2018 budget. Mr. Speaker, the 2019 budget has provided $28 million to furnish this extension, including the new dormitory and the extension of the ministry's head office. Mr. Speaker, I must mention that in partnership with IDB and the Ministry of Public Health, a new maternity waiting room was constructed to the tune of $10.7 million to accommodate 15 beds, which will add to the 22 beds that existed previously. This will strengthen health delivery and bring comfort to our Indigenous women. The Year of Indigenous Languages. Mr. Speaker, the sum of $36 million has been provided for activities to mark the Year of Indigenous Languages in 2019, which will see villages taking part in various activities to promote the 9 languages spoken in Guyana. Sports. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs has adopted an all-sports policy that sees a facilitator traveling to the various Indigenous villages and establishing clubs with their own constitutions. Also teaching them the game of chess, as I said before in the previous last year's budget speech, and promoting football. Mr. Speaker, for the first time ever this year, a football tournament was catered for in the 2018 budget to the sum of $1 million for the Region 8 football tournament to be carried out in August this year, which saw also for the first time ever a FIFA director attending this occasion. Mr. Speaker, there are so many things this budget has to offer, but I cannot. We are 2 ministers, and Minister Alicock will adequately represent the rest of it. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank this government that I am proud to be a part of for giving the Indigenous people of this country a chance that they have never had before to transform their lives by empowering them and providing the financial support they need. And I have no hesitation in endorsing the 2019 budget of $300.7 million to this August House. Thank you.